Beneath this peaceful landscape, a fire still burns. Not on the surface, no flames, but deep underground, where it has raged unchecked for over 6 decades. This is the story of Centralia, Pennsylvania, a once thriving town quietly consumed not by disaster from above, but by an unrelenting blaze from below. A community erased by a fire that simply refused to die. In the early 1800s, eastern Pennsylvania sat atop a powerful resource, anthracite coal. Hard, dense, and energy-rich, anthracite fueled America's growing factories, railroads, and homes. Where coal was found, opportunity followed. Prospectors, investors, and workers were drawn to the region of Centralia, hoping to build a better future beneath the hills. In 1866, the town Centralia was officially founded and was named for its central location within the coal fields of Pennsylvania. Initially, the town consisted of dirt roads, mine entrances, and basic wooden structures, but it didn't take long for the town to grow. Coal companies opened mines and workers arrived with their families. A community began to form. Early Centralia was difficult, but hopeful. Men worked long hours on the ground in dangerous conditions. Women managed homes and supported families. Children attended small schools and helped when they could. Despite the hardships, the town was alive with activity. Stores gradually opened, churches were established, and a close-knit community began to develop. Local businesses supported the town's needs. Festivals and gatherings brought people together. Many families had immigrated from Europe, consisted of mainly Irish, Welsh, German, and English immigrants. They were drawn by coal jobs and the promise of stability. They brought traditions, languages, and cultures that shaped Centralia's identity. By the late 1800s, Centralia had reached its peak population of 2,761 residents. No one imagined that the same coal beneath their feet that initially generated this community would one day force the town to vanish. For now, Centralia was young, full of hope, and built to last. By the early 1900s, coal production in Pennsylvania had peaked, and mining began to decline. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, many young men in Centralia left and the town began to shrink. Post-war labor strikes and the rise of cheap fuel oil further reduced demand for coal. The Great Depression hit hard. In 1929, the Lehigh Valley Coal Company closed 5 coal mines and some men turned to bootleg mining to survive. Bootleg mining consisted of digging small illegal tunnels in abandoned mines to collect leftover coal. With scarce jobs and families struggling, this risky business became a way to survive. Bootleg mining was dangerous, and the tunnels were unstable, poorly ventilated, and often unmarked. Miners had no safety equipment, and the underground networks were forgotten by the companies that once owned it. Coal production briefly revived during World War II, but by 1950, Centralia's population had dropped to just under 2,000. Mining continued for a few more years, but by 1960, all local mines had closed and only about 1,435 people remained. These abandoned and improvised tunnels later created a hidden hazard beneath Centralia that would change the course of history for this town. On the morning of May 27, 1962, Memorial Day in the quiet coal town of Centralia, residents began to prepare for a familiar tradition. Flags were raised, families gathered, and a local parade was set to honor fallen soldiers. However, beneath the town lay a vast network of abandoned mine tunnels, remnants of decades of anthracite coal mining. Though largely out of sight, those mines were truly never gone. As part of Memorial Day preparations, town officials ordered the cleanup of the Centralia landfill located in an old strip mining pit near the cemetery. This was common practice. Trash had been burned there before, many times without incident. 5 volunteer firemen initially sprayed water on the landfill flames, thinking the fire was under control. 2 days later, on May 29th, new fires appeared, and investigations soon revealed a hole leading directly to the abandoned coal mine tunnels beneath Centralia. Efforts to stop the underground blaze began immediately. Water was pumped into the mines and surface was covered with clay, but the fire still continued. In the days that followed, smoke began to rise from cracks in the ground. The air also carried a strange sulfur odor. At first, residents were told the situation was under control, but on the ground, the fire continued to spread, moving miles of coal veins beneath Centralia. Multiple attempts were made to stop it. Crews tried digging trenches and continued to pump water and ash into the mines. However, these attempts were not enough to stop the flames. What began as a routine landfill burn had become an unstoppable underground inferno. For years, life in Centralia went on. Children attended school, churches held services, the shops stayed open, but the signs of danger grew harder to ignore. Smoke began to rise from unexpected places. The ground felt warmer even in winter. Roads buckled from the heat below. Basements are filled with dangerous gases. Trees withered as their roots were scorched from underneath. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, carbon monoxide levels became a serious threat. Families who had lived in Centralia for generations were forced to make an impossible choice: stay in a town slowly being consumed from below, or walk away from everything they knew. By 1981, nearly 20 years after the underground coal fire began, the town of Centralia was already changing. Many families had moved away, and warnings about dangerous ground and toxic gases were becoming more common. But for those who remained, daily life still went on, until one afternoon in February, 12-year-old boy Todd Dombrowski was walking near his grandmother's home with his cousin when, without warning, the ground beneath him collapsed. A sinkhole, caused by the underground mine fire, suddenly opened where solid ground had been moments before. Todd fell into the opening, which dropped deep below into the ground. Steam and fumes from the fire below made the situation even more dangerous. For a moment, it seemed as though the fire had been burned beneath Centralia for decades had finally claimed a life above ground. But Todd's cousin acted quickly. Holding onto nearby roots and debris, he was able to grab Todd and pull him to safety just in time. Todd survived the fall, shaken but alive. The incident shocked the town. For years, officials had warned that the underground fire posed serious risks, but the sudden appearance of sinkhole made those dangers impossible to ignore. The ground itself could no longer be trusted. After the incident, government agencies increased pressure to relocate the remaining residents by buying them out.
When officials came to talk to local people in Centralia, they heard more local talk that the only way to put out the fire is to dig up the coal and part of the town. Many federal government to buy out Centralia. In fact, the May primary election here will feature a referendum on relocating the people. At an average of $50,000 per home, it would cost $25 million to buy out the town. But one borough councilman says old coal maps suggest Centralia sits on more than $400 million worth of coal that could be mined and sold if the town is moved. Ironically, the coal that threatens this place is often discussed locally as an asset.
Though Todd survived, the event marked a turning point. Many families who had resisted leaving finally accepted the buyouts and moved away. Homes were demolished, roads were closed, and Centralia continued its transformation into a near ghost town. The sinkhole of 1981 became one of the most well-known moments in Centralia's long struggle with the underground fire, changing the once thriving town into one that is unrecognizable. In 1992, Centralia was no longer the bustling coal town it once had been. After 30 years of an underground mine fire burning beneath the community, most residents had already left. That year, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania made a decisive move. The state used eminent domains to condemn nearly all remaining properties in Centralia. This legal action allowed the government to take ownership of the land, officially declaring the town unsafe for long-term habitation. Utilities, such as water, electricity, and sewage services, were gradually shut down. The streets were closed, homes were demolished. What remained of Centralia was no longer considered a functioning town. While a small number of residents resisted the decision and chose to stay, the state made its position clear: Centralia could not be saved. Officials determined that fighting the fire would cost more than relocating the population, and there was no guarantee the fire could ever be fully extinguished. The focus shifted from saving the town to protecting public safety. Today, Centralia, Pennsylvania is almost unrecognizable, only home to a handful of residents. What remains is a quiet, eerie landscape shaped by an underground fire that has been burning since 1962. The coal seam fire beneath Centralia continues to burn, slowly consuming the earth below. Steam and smoke still rise from cracks in the pavement, and some streets have been permanently closed because the ground is unstable. The fire is expected to burn for hundreds of years. Most of the town's buildings are gone, only a few houses remain, occupied by people who refuse to leave, and a small stretch of Pennsylvania Route 61, now cut off, shows where life once thrived. This road would become known as the Graffiti Highway. This has drawn attention from curious visitors and photographers who want to see the abandoned town and the smoke rising from the ground. Some also believe Centralia inspired the video game Silent Hill. This town carries a unique historical memory. The town's history of coal mining, the 1962 fire, and the gradual evacuation of residents are preserved in stories, photographs, and the remaining cemeteries. For historians, scientists, and urban explorers, Centralia is a living lesson in the consequences of an underground fire left unchecked. Today, Centralia is quiet. The town that once rang with the sounds of daily life is now a shadow of itself, a reminder that some disasters cannot be reversed, and that the earth beneath us may hold dangers we cannot always see.